Welcome to Shift, everybody. If this is your first time here, you can scan this QR code, and if you fill out the Connect card, we're gonna send you some free Opus coffee. And make sure that you check out the Coffee with Joe option so that you can grab that cup of coffee with Joe Smith, so you're not all alone. Or if that's what you prefer, never mind, that's fine too. And you can ask any and all questions that you want or need to know. Today is our all-shift meeting. It's gonna be no more than 30 minutes right after service. We're gonna be talking about what's coming over the next 6 months and opening up all the financials for everybody. And childcare is available for those who need it. Are you in middle or high school? If so, then you're invited to our Shift student beach trip. It's gonna be on June 12th. We're gonna meet here at the building at It's gonna be on June 12th. We're gonna meet here at the building at 9 a.m. Make sure that you bring snacks, drinks, your towel, sunscreen, all that kind of, beach necessity kind of stuff. We're gonna be coming back to the building at around 4, and the cover is only $10 because, gas can be pricey. It's gonna be a ton of fun, so don't miss out. Now it's time for week 5 of our series Coming Home with special guest speaker, Zack and Tyler Mayo-Frey.
Yes, good morning. Zack and Tyler are going to come up in just a second, but before they do, I want to welcome everybody. If you're new, my name is Joe, I'm the lead pastor here. And like she said, we're in week 5 of a series we're called Coming Home. And we're looking at this metaphor of home as something that we grow up trying to leave, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to come back to. And so one of the ways that we've done that is that we've held space. Could you go ahead and turn those lights back off, please? So what we've done is we hold some space in the very beginning. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is whatever came before this is to just gently set that aside, whatever that was. And then whatever's coming next, just lovingly hold it where it's supposed to be, right? Next. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and just, if you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes and take a few deep cleansing breaths as we do that. And go ahead and root yourself into this space. Like focus on the deep breathing and how the chair supports your weight. Your feet rooted into the ground. And as you do that, what comes to mind when I say the word home? It could be something completely different from previous weeks. It could be the same thing. Go ahead and hold that. And now I want to ask you, what does chosen family mean to you? What do you picture? When you're ready, take a few more deep breaths, and I invite you to open your eyes. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to do something a little differently. If you guys would go ahead and come on up. This is Zack and Tyler, and I have asked them to come be a part of this as we talk about this idea of chosen family. And Zack and Tyler, if you listen to our podcast at all, I think they were episode like 3 or 4 or maybe 5. You were one of the very first ones a year ago. Yes. A year ago, and you're the second most listened to episode still. So yes, I know. Right?
We have to beat out.
Brent Roberts.
Wow.
I don't know if some of you. He was the first one. But it is my wife's ex-boyfriend. Before he came out.
Been there.
Yeah. So what I've asked Zack and Tyler to do is come and share with us about this idea of chosen family as we look through this idea of coming home. And I thought, who better than these two who are so just good at loving and bringing in people and creating that for not only yourself, but for so many others. And if one of you would just kind of like, I'll put a link on something for you all to go listen to their whole story because there's just not time. And it's not even the whole story. But if you could just like maybe give us a glimpse for those of you that don't know you at all, like just a little bit about your background and how you ended up here.
You are so much more succinct than I am. Sure you don't want to?
Okay.
All right. So I'm Tyler, and this is Zack. You will be quizzed later. So Zack and I live here in Gainesville, and we have been married just over a year. We have 5 bio kids, and this is our foster son, Ben. You want to say hi, Ben? Go on, Ben. He's really excited about this. What grade are you in? That's it.
Second ended Friday.
Oh, 3rd grade.
And how old are you? 8. All right, so thanks. So Ben is our foster kiddo, and so this is our chosen family. This is our nuclear family, and so Zack and I were both married to women, so we have our 5 biological kids. They're moms this week, and it was very much though a tumultuous journey to get to this point, understandably so. And it involved a lot of rejection and church and religious trauma. We were both raised in the church in different sects of evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. And it just came to this place where we recognized that we were brainwashed. And that's really the only way to be able to put it, right? We accepted things for face value as truth without questioning them because we were told we weren't allowed to. And just have gone through a lot to get to this point, and I think that that's as succinct as I can make it.
To be fair, the people we were brainwashed by were brainwashed themselves, so it wasn't like
we all know that feeling.
I don't think.
Yes, yeah, I think everybody here probably, that tracks. So what I did is I wrote down just a few questions, and then at the end, if any of you have questions, we'll give opportunity for that. We might stick with these, but just depending on where the conversation goes, right? So the first question that I wrote down was, how did your faith or understanding of faith evolve in the face of that rejection from your religious communities? And then how did that shape finding this idea of chosen family?
Just let it. It's your turn. No.
No, so Joe graciously sent us the questions ahead of time. And as we were reading through this last night, we're like, it's interesting because the evolution of our faith didn't come after being rejected. The reason we were rejected was because our faith evolved. Mm-hmm. And so we, growing up in a very conservative space, our faith was, looking back, it was really shallow because it was just exactly what everybody else said it had to be. Right, it wasn't dug into. And so when we I think COVID had a lot to do with it, where we were seeing a lot of the injustices endorsed by the capital C church, the racial injustice and some of the things that were going on. And so it was really challenging us, where we were already kind of struggling. I was married for 10 years, and so I was already kind of struggling through this whole, how do I embrace who I am, but still have faith the way that I've always known it. And the truth is, you can't. You have to evolve. And so as we were talking about it last night, Tyler was like, we evolved our faith on our own, in our own hearts, as we were going along this journey. And then we were at the point that, I don't remember how you said it last night, but it was perfect. Like, we had to get to the point where we couldn't represent the faith that we had been brought up with anymore. And so that's where the rejection came, because we made that decision that we had to step out and challenge.
Yeah, I think that the way we were talking about it last night was we were very involved with a local church here that is very fundamentalist evangelical. And I remember my now ex-wife and I sat down with the pastor, and we were just asking at this point in my mind, very vanilla questions, very baseline understandings of just life in general. And we were talking about huge plug for the Bible for Normal People. Amazing podcast. That, if I could pick one resource that really helped me a lot with my deconstruction and reconstruction of my understanding of faith and spirituality, that would be it. So we were talking about that podcast, and we were talking about I don't even remember exactly what it was, but again, very vanilla topic. And this pastor, he just stopped me like in the middle of my sentence and he was like, now, I need you to understand, people who ask these questions, who read these types of authors, they wade out into these waters, and sometimes they can never come back. And I just remember almost laughing. I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't. But thinking to myself, like, you claim that you're trying to search for truth. You claim that that's what you're here to do, is to lead people to the truth. But asking questions is not allowed. Like, it just didn't make sense. And it finally was one of those epiphany kind of moments for me where I was like, okay, yeah.
And to that point, if your truth is the truth, then we'll come back to it. You know what I mean?
Ask the
So
question.
if you're asking the questions and digging in, and it leads you away from your truth, then it's probably not the truth. If that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It absolutely makes sense. And I will also say too that that I think a lot of times people that are still in that will hear things like that, and they'll use the idea of like, well, you're just trying to excuse your sin, or you just want to sin more. And I think the reality, and I
I've
won't
said that exact same thing multiple times.
Yeah. And I won't speak for you, but for me personally, it was because I held this idea of scripture or faith in a place of honor that I had to pursue it to where I went. And then I couldn't, and like you just said, I could never go back. So it wasn't, I don't want to do whatever I want to do, right? Like it was like the pursuit of truth and what is the meaning of all of it, blah, blah. But yeah. So in that trajectory that you guys were like on separately, but also like knowing your full story, like also kind of in the same togetherness. How did the rejection of all of that, the evolution of your understanding of faith, how did that all shape this idea of chosen family? How did that, and maybe it wasn't even like conscious at the time, like a conscious decision to do at the time, but like you guys had done it. Like, was it a conscious decision, or was it just like you're both just so like kind of this kind of people anyway?
Yeah, that's something.
No, I was just thinking, kind of tying the last question to this question, the evolution of faith for me came from an understanding that my faith was a book before, and it evolved to a love, an understanding of love. And so that kind of goes into this question where I don't know if it was a conscious decision to love better, but that is what resulted from the evolution of our faith.
Just a byproduct.
Loving people better. And when you love people, they love you back, and so it's almost a byproduct to have chosen family, just in loving people well.
Yeah, and I think like something else that's been like in going through these questions and thinking about this whole idea of chosen family, something that's kind of reoccurred in my own mind is you have to let go of people's perception of you. Like you have to be okay with people not liking you or disagreeing with you, and that's really, really difficult to do in most evangelical fundamentalist spheres.
For some people.
For some people, for
Our
sure.
daughter would be like, screw you. This is who I am. But for us, we both have a personality that like we want to be liked. We don't want people to hate us or send those messages that we got after the podcast airing, like some of the things that we got from it. And that we did have to get to a point where like, we know that we are loving people well, and if other people are not okay with that, we have to be okay with them not being okay with that.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I don't remember who said it, but I think that it sums up what you said really well. They said you've just got to be okay with being the bad guy in somebody's story. You're always the bad guy in somebody's story, and you've just got to be okay with that. Especially in the age of social media, where people can just like say, and they'll say things that are just like normally they wouldn't say to your face, but they'll say it like this.
So Taylor Swift quote about that.
Yes. And is there?
It's in the song where she says, "Shade never made anybody less gay." Yeah. Say it in the streets, that's a knockout. Say it in the tweet, that's a cop-out. That's what it is. There you go, Taylor, if you're watching.
And she watches every week.
Of course she does. Why wouldn't she watch
She watches every week. But in the age of social media, like I've really had to learn to just be like, you cross that line. I'll engage with you for a minute, but then you start to cross the line, and it's okay to just delete and block. You didn't win. I'm just not giving you energy anymore, and which is really difficult for me because I definitely want to win. So can you
sound like our pastor.
yeah. Drake? Yes.
Yeah.
We're very similar. And I know I sent it to you ahead of time. Were there specific experiences that kind of helped transform that rejection that you experienced? I think one of my favorite quotes of all time is Richard Rohr, who says, all great spirituality is what we do with our pain. We either transform it or we transmit it. And I know that one of the things that I've learned in the several years that I've been invited into this space is how so many people have transformed that pain. And because of that, it is great spirituality. So like, are there moments that you can look back on that where you were able to like include and transcend those moments that at the time felt horrible?
Yeah, so when we were talking about that question in particular, I was like, I know exactly which moment kind of comes to my mind, like that visceral response of like all of those emotions coming back up. And again, not to go too deep into the story because it is a long story, but essentially in one of the really, really dark points of us having to go through what we did have to go through to get to this point, one of our divorces was really, really dark, dragged our name through the mud in the worst possible way.
It was fine. He's not going to say that. It was fine.
Anyways, and so through this process, though, the church that we were a part of here in Gainesville decided to take on this holy mission of investigating us for child molestation because of our sexuality and of our own children. And so in that, we needed to really find out who our real chosen family were, who our actual friends were. And so I needed characters of reference for the fact that I'm not a child molester. And so it was actually a really, really beautiful moment for me now looking back because like dozens of people came out of the woodwork happily saying like, no, this is nonsense. There's no way that there's any validity to this. But one of my really, really good friends at the time, like I genuinely would have considered him one of my best friends, was also very, very involved in this church. And he sat on leadership, and he was actually an openly gay man, but the church that we went to was not affirming. And so he was just either going to have to be celibate forever or marry the opposite sex, and that was just the belief system we were in. And I obviously reached out to him, and he was the only person who didn't respond. One other person said, no, I'm not comfortable doing that, which I respected completely, but he didn't respond at all. And so a couple of days went by, and I just gave him a call. I was like, hey, wanted to make sure you're okay because I haven't heard from you. And he was like, yeah, no, I saw it. I just haven't really responded yet because I'm processing it. And I was like, well, there's a court date coming up, so I need it. Just let me know whatever your answer is. A couple of days went by again, so I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, I totally understand if the answer is no, but I really need to know to send this to the attorneys. And at the end of the day, he didn't respond again. So I just said, hey, I need you to understand that as my friend, I need you to show up for me. That's what I need from you. And then his response was, the answer is no, I'm not going to do that. And it really just spoke to me, and even to this day, it's really impactful for me to understand now what boundaries really are. Like, what is that? It's not about cutting someone off because you don't like them anymore, they disagree with you. It's about protecting yourself and being able to expect or know what to expect from other people. And that's what I think chosen family means for me, is like, I know that any of my chosen family who are here today or who aren't here today, if I said, hey, I really need you right now, I need you to show up for me, there would be no doubt in their mind about the status quo of their position.
Where we bury the body, right?
But there would be no doubt in my mind that any of those people that are my chosen family now, I told them I need them to show up, they wouldn't even think twice about it, especially over something as trivial as their status in the church or their position with other relationships that would incur upon. So yeah, that's kind of the immediate visceral reaction when I read that question. I was like, I know exactly what that moment was.
So just sticking with that for a second, how did that shape? Like, is it just in the recognition over time of boundaries and recognizing, okay, that's not true relationship? Is that how you were able to transform that into something almost helpful now? I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase it.
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at, is like, it definitely was a transitioning point, but that was like that cornerstone moment, that quintessential moment where I was like, that's not love.
Yeah.
That's not family.
Yeah.
That this is conditional, you know? And coming to that place has definitely taken a long time, but knowing what it is that I personally need and want out of a relationship is kind of like where my mind goes back to with that example.
I think it's also when you're like in parenting, right? You see things happen and you're like, oh, I don't ever want to be that parent, right? It's the same with this. Like, we had this friend that we thought was a really good friend and then saw how that was all played out. We're like, we don't ever want somebody to have that experience with our friendship. There needs to be communication, transparency, boundaries, and all the things that lacked in that situation. So turning that into almost a positive energy of doing our best to never have something like that happen from our side of the table.
Got lots of thoughts. So kind of sticking with that idea, how does that inform, how do you like practically live that out now? Like, I mean, we see your friends and stuff, and I know, like behind the scenes, some of it, but having come from where the journey that you got, because that's all we are, right? We're just like the decisions that we make or the decisions made for us, and they shape who we are and how we think. And so how has that like shaped what you do now, how you live just on a day-to-day? It's not even, and what's crazy to me, maybe crazy is not the right word, but what's really profound to me is that this is not just like some sort of program. Like, you don't lead a program. This isn't like, yeah, you have a small group, but you have a small group because of how you live, right? Like, that's why they asked you to lead that group, was because you're already doing it. So I don't even know how I'm asking that.
I think I got it. I think I got where you're going. So
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of what I was talking about before, is this idea of like being okay with people's opinion of you, even if it's not a positive opinion. And so like right now, our house is a hot mess express. Like, we just had a bunch of work that we were doing this weekend. And if I was in the same place I would have been 7 years ago, I would not feel comfortable inviting anyone in this room back to my house at that point, because perspective and how people view you and how people view me was really, really important. And I feel like that's a really tangible example of exactly what you're talking about. Like, anyone wants to come back, we're having spaghetti, right? Like, come on in, come to the crazy farm, everything's all over the place. And that...
Just give us 30 minutes.
That's the point. It's like that wasn't, that intimacy, right? Everything has to be polished. Everything has to be okay. And something that we like to say, so we go to Maison, we're very involved with Maison, another church here in Gainesville that's affirming now. And something that we like to say to each other a lot is, if somebody walks up to you on Sunday morning and asks you, how are you? And you say, fine, you better actually be fine. Because we want and expect a real answer. We want you to say, I am trucking going through it right now, and that's okay. Like, we want you to be genuine and real and honest, because that vulnerability is what transfers to intimacy. And that's what we really mean by chosen family. It's being real and honest and being okay with things not being okay.
Yeah, and I think it gets you could bring it back to a very simple concept that all of us have heard, is you have to be a friend to have friends, right? And when we're talking to people that, we do a lot of mentoring without knowing we're mentoring, if that makes sense, because we're having conversations, and a lot of those conversations from the queer community are, I'm so lonely, or I don't have any friends, or I don't have a good community like you do. And I hate that cop-out, because it's not like we didn't fall into it. It was very intentional. And so being a good friend, and what does that look like? We, for I don't know how many weeks in a row, we were like, our goal was find somebody at church we haven't had lunch with, and then ask them to come to our house after church and just have lunch with them, get to know them. And a lot of our friendships have come out of just those lunch dates right after church, when nobody really has any plans. You're just like, yeah, I kind of want to take a nap, or whatever. But it's being very intentional and coming down to understanding that. I think a big realization to me was that even the people, and Drake would be fine with me saying this, but Drake, our pastor Drake and his husband Brent, like the people that are in leadership, in any sphere, I always thought like, oh, they're they're good. They don't need to have lunch with me. They don't need to have coffee with me. They've got their whole posse, right? And everybody else thinks the same thing. So they end up being the lonely ones, right? And so it's just being really intentional and taking it a step further where it might be uncomfortable, and it does come down to, you have echo chambers. We all have echo chambers, people that think the same way we do, feel the same way we do. It's very easy for us to connect with another gay dad, Andy, that has been through a divorce and grew up conservative and was married to a woman. It's really easy for us to make those connections. I won't call you out, but I know you're back row back there. But then also taking it a step further to say, we, and I'll just be really honest, when we finally got to the place where we were okay with our own sexuality, we still weren't okay with gender struggles, if that makes sense, like transgenderism and all that. Like that was still really far-fetched and hard for us to understand. And just being intentional about, we're like, how sad is this? That we're like, we need to make some transgender friends, And now that we have transgender friends, we're like, we were so stupid not to understand or dig in more to understand this community of people. And it's the same, and so it's yes, all the people that you relate to, but it's also the people that you might not relate to. The older generation. We have a lot of older, like, not your age, like older. But older, in their 70s and 80s. We have some really great friends now because we were intentional about reaching out and being a part of it.
Well, thanks for coming.
Sorry.
It's
because you got such a young wife. She makes your life really
So, but something, hey, let's reel it in. It's not that funny. But something that you spoke to, it's not on our list of questions, all right? But something that you spoke of, or spoke towards, is something that's been on my mind for several months now. And so for the month of June, I'm doing this it's social media, but like something I've learned every day for every day in the month of June. And so I've got this list of 30 things, we're about 30 things. And one of those is, we all grew up in the same space. I think everybody here grew up in the same kind of space. And our church has taught us a very disembodied faith, right? Flesh is wrong, your body is wrong. And it doesn't matter if you were straight or queer, your body is just straight up wrong. From the moment you come into existence, that first breath, you are deserving of eternal conscious torment, and that is the good news of Jesus. Right? And
that's why I got saved at 4.
Right? I think we all have, there's the membership cards. But one of the things that I've really began to see, like, solidify is and it's not, I'm not painting with a broad stroke, so it's not every queer person is this, okay? But one of the things that I have noticed is that a lot of queer people live a very embodied life. And whether that's spiritual or not, right? But they live a very embodied life. And I can't speak to obviously everything, but a lot of the times it feels like it was because they were forced to do the work. Like you were just forced to do the work. Like you just didn't have a choice. Like to take the next breath, to take the next step, to just wake up the next day. There was work that had to be done, and you had to do it, right? And so I wonder how much that plays into just like this idea of doing that internal work, that shadow work, however you want to put it, of being able to be okay with whatever people think. And sit in that and still be okay with it, because your humanity, right? Your identity doesn't rest and honestly doesn't rest in what other people think of you, because you've done that work and you're healed, ongoing healing, but you're healed. Does that when you say that, that's all I think of is like that work that had to be done behind the scenes to like get past the ego, to like let go of the false self and embrace the true self and those kinds of things. I don't know if you have any.
I think it's a chicken or the egg type situation, because it is to have the chosen family that sees you as you truly are also helps you not have to deal with that. So, not that you don't deal with it, but not have to deal with it as much, and it kind of gets...
Or alone.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really difficult, and that's why intentionality is so important. It's really difficult to see yourself in that embodied way or that beautiful way without other people reinforcing it, you know, and even just in our marriage, you know, the amount of times that Tyler has complimented me and built me up in so many ways that I was torn down before because of my religion has brought me to the place where now I can have that confidence and build other people up. So it is a chicken or the egg, because you do have to kind of fake it till you make it a little bit at the beginning, but that is in the intentionality of then being vulnerable with someone and saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, you know, whether it's a physical thing or a spiritual thing or a mental thing or parenting thing. Like, we are all in this journey. I can't tell you how many times we're with other people's kids and I'm like, let me know if I overstepped with your kid, like, you know, because we're in this, it's a village, and if we treat it as a village, then we can be intentional. And there's a lot of things that, you know, we always hear time heals things, and a lot of these relationships that were destructive for us were very, you know, you kind of step out of them and you're like, I hope it heals, or I hope whatever. But it's really important not to waste that time that it's taking to heal other relationships with no new ones, you know, and being intentional about creating a space where you can be vulnerable. We have Tuesday night, you know, queer nights where we get together, a community group from church, and it's actually kind of funny because most of the people that show up have never set foot in our church. You know, we just have a chosen family, and we all kind of get together and bring different. I think it's back to your question. I think that is something we thrive on, is being able to pull chosen family from church, and chosen family from work, and chosen family from our blood family, and chosen family from, you know, our foster connection, and all these different families, and pull them together and help them strengthen bonds with more chosen family themselves. Because we can build people up just by connecting them with somebody else that might relate to them better, or connecting them to somebody else that'll be there when we're not able to be there or whatever. So I think that's really important in the bigger scheme of things, is to have that in my mind. I'm like, who can I have over Sunday, you know, that is going to connect to the person I already have invited for Sunday, you know, and then how can we build those bonds so that they can have a better chosen family going forward?
Yeah. So I have a question. I have a question that it might speak to people here, but knowing that we're going to chop this up and put this out all over the interwebs, right? And like, there will be people that see this that aren't here, they're not from Gainesville. My question to you is, how can the church, especially this being Pride Month, and this is kind of our focus right now, how can the church, obviously there's a section of the church that's just like, it is what it is, right? Like, we're just going to be their enemy, and we're just going to have to be okay with that, right? They don't like us, that's fine, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. But how can churches that are actually seeking to do the work, how can they do it better? How can churches better support that idea of chosen family, better support queer people in that, and not even just queer people, but like, there is an epidemic of just loneliness right now. And just in your opinion, like, if somebody came to you and said, here, fix it.
Yeah. I think it goes the same from my perspective for the church as it does for any human being. Zack just said something that I think was actually, it kind of hit me the way that he said it for some reason for the first time. We have our chosen family. A decent amount of our chosen family are biologically related to us. What that means is somebody does not have to agree with us and the decisions that we've made that make sense to us for the experience that we've lived. But they do have to accept us. And I think that that's exactly what the church needs to do. We have to be okay with disagreeing. We have to be okay with someone looking at us in a poor light. But we have to be able to accept it. And I think that that's what a lot of times individuals, families, and churches do really poorly, is say that they're accepting, and they're not actually accepting. So that's kind of what it boils down for me. We were kind of talking about that earlier.
Yeah, and I think practically what can we do? There's so many resources out there. There's so, and like you said, it's not just a queer thing. It's an everybody thing. Like loneliness is kind of a thing now that we have, our kids. We see our kids, we're like, get off the screens. Like find the kid down the road that goes to school with you and play or do something, whereas I think it's just changed our whole perspective of how do we practically live out this intentionality. And I think as churches, your question was specific to churches, how do we embrace this community? How do we create chosen family? I think it really comes down to having the resources, having somebody dedicated to finding those meetup groups that people would thrive at, having somebody that is not just a hospitality person to stand at the front door, and I'm saying this to me as much as I'm saying it to anybody here, is having that hospitality person to get to know, to spearhead getting to know a person that came in that they've never seen before, whether they've been there a lot of, many times or not. And in the queer community, we are, just from personal experience, we are very much looking for the opposite of, well, let me say it this way. There are a lot of stereotypes about the queer community and what we want and what we're looking for. And a lot of times it's the opposite. We're really just looking for a family. Mm-hmm. We're just really looking for somebody that's going to take us in and take us to lunch and invite us over for Thanksgiving because our family won't. Or, have a secret Santa together at Christmas time or whatever it is, figuring out like where some of our best friends are Jewish and just getting to know this lesbian couple that's Jewish and understanding who they are as people and what they want out of life and being able to then step into some of that and say, oh, I can provide this. I can provide friendship. I can provide a babysitter when you guys need to have a date night. I can provide whatever it is, being practically intentional and not going, okay, as a church, we've got to put on these huge events. That's great, but it's almost more isolating. Because you get to those huge events and you're like, ugh. There's all these people that are like me, but none of them are my actual friend. Nobody actually knows who I am. And to Tyler's point earlier, we could call on, a whole bunch of our chosen family came today just because we were going to be here sharing with you guys. And that to call on people, and like yesterday, I put a floor in our boys' room. And it was literally somebody that, we've just chosen to be family with. We never knew them before. A year and a half ago, and literally the whole day, us very young people on our knees, banging things against.
It's the last time. Take pictures because you'll never see him here again.
Anyway, but just being able to, I knew that this specific individual. On Friday night, I said, hey, can we do the floor tomorrow? And he's like, hey, we're in St. Augustine, but we can come back tonight. Can we just stay at your house? And then we can get started early. And then his husband was like, hey, you, Tyler, and I will take the kids out so they're not in your way so you guys can focus on the floor. Like, that doesn't happen in the life I used to live. I couldn't just call on somebody and say, hey, I have an open day. Can you come put in a whole floor with me?
Yeah, can you imagine, if any of you have been in that evangelical space, going up to someone at that time in your life, being like, hey, you and your family will be taking your single Saturday off, the only day of the entire week where you have nothing else going on, and you're going to come help me and my family. That's what family actually is, And that, in the space that I was in, that never would have happened, ever.
So they actually have a little slideshow with some music and stuff that they made for everybody, so you could kind of see some of their chosen family. So if you want to go ahead and play that.
share genes or a surname. You are my chosen family. So what if we don't look the same? We've been going through the same thing. You are my chosen family. We don't need to be related to race. We don't need to share genes or a surname. You are chosen family. So what if we don't look the same? We've been going through the same thing. You are my chosen family.
Aw, that was sneaky, sneaky.
Can you tell we like food?
And old guys.
Seriously. So I don't how do I recover from that? You don't. So does anybody before we kind of end, and we'll end with a song, and we'll end differently than we normally do. But does anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask? If so, you can. If not, that's totally fine. Anybody have anything?
Sure, everyone. Thanks for visiting us today. So a lot of the chosen family you mentioned were friends. So I'm curious, do you see a distinction between friendship and chosen family? And if so, what's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are, so because of a lot of the stuff we went through, we were very guarded for a while because we didn't want to let people in. Because the people that were family before, that knew everything and we were vulnerable with, ended up being the ones testifying against us in a court trial, So it took a minute to, I think at the beginning we were very much like, let's just make a lot of friends. And then this chosen family concept kind of hit us like right between the eyes, like we don't have that family anymore and we want to be able to be really vulnerable and pull the walls down with specific people, but how do we know who to do that with? And I think it's a lot like a relationship, like when you're going into friendship and then it turns into dating or it turns into marriage or whatever, I think there's almost steps along the way that they're like indicating, not red flags, but indicating flags of like, okay, they were vulnerable with me on this, I'm gonna be vulnerable with them on this, or I asked them to be vulnerable about this and they were, and so I'm gonna end up being vulnerable back with them about this or whatever. And so I think the defining line is we have a ton of friends, but they're not all going to get that look into our life because there's almost a, what would you say, like almost a decision we make together as a couple now that, hey, these people we're gonna do life with these people instead of just, we're gonna see them around.
And I think even more so than that, it really is kind of like what Zach was pointing to before. It's either the chicken or the egg, right? And so if we've tried to be vulnerable and tried to be intimate with people who are just like, we're good, like this is where we want to be, respecting that boundary is just as important, right? It goes both ways.
And we don't do drama. So we had way too much drama leading up to this point. So if there's going to be drama, there's actually people who have been part of our chosen family that we've said, we need a boundary, because even positive relationships or friendships can be unhealthy. And so being able to recognize that and say, hey, we might need to take a minute and take a step back, and we can hang out, but we can't deal with drama. We have 6 kids, we have jobs, we have businesses, we have all these different things. We don't have time to deal with why you're offended that person did this and that and that. That's not what chosen family is. Chosen family is having that close-knit relationship that like it really does come down to, and it sounds like almost a needy thing, but it comes down to who's gonna be there if your tire blows at 3 o'clock in the morning. I know I can call.
Or if you need a character witness.
Or if you need a character witness.
How would you need one of those?
Exactly, but I know that even though Andy would hate getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd be there in 2 seconds, because that's what chosen family is.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you guys very much.
Really?
So instead of our normal time of reflection at the end, we want to honor everybody's time. And so what we're going to do is the band will come back up. They're going to sing a song. And I just want to say something about the song. And while they're playing the song, if you would like to participate in communion, which are those small cups there on the seat, for us it's a weekly reminder of the teachings and the life of Jesus. And I think today one of the things that we can really think about is that idea of family and community. The song that we're going to sing, I'll pray for us, and then they'll go into the song. The song that we're going to sing is called "Middle of It," and it's written by Sam and Haley Hedrick. And Sam is a worship pastor up in Oregon. Tori and I got to talk with Sam, and we've messaged back and forth, texted a few times, and he actually sent the chord charts because they're not out there, because he wrote this song for his church. And I'm telling you about this because he led this song while we were at the Post-Evangelical Collective Conference, and it was towards the end of it. And Sam is a transgender man and is very open about his story. And when you sing the song, there's like two verses. Yeah, there's like two verses to the whole song, and it's a repetition. All right, it's almost a prayer. Like I don't even know if it's a prayer. It's a declaration. All right, and so as you go through that, I want you to think and listen to the words, but also the fact of who wrote it, the journey that Sam had to get on the stage to sing the song, right, is much the same journey that Zack and Tyler talked about, of just that hell and then transforming that pain into something beautiful. And so I'm going to pray, and then if you want to take that communion, you can. If not, it's no problem, but we're going to stand and we're going to sing the song, and then we'll go about our day. God of community, we thank you for this time together. Thank you for Zack and Tyler, their heart, their vulnerability, their willingness to share part of their story with a room full of people they know and a room full of people they don't. God, I pray that as this story gets told, not only just in the conversations that we have later, but on the stream and then on social media, God, I pray that it opens doors for people, that it heals, that it brings just visibility, that somebody feels seen, and now maybe it helps them do the thing that they need to do. We're thankful that we continue to find each other in places like this, but in also other sacred spaces. And we want to lift up this whole month and all of the sacred spaces that are going to happen all over this city. We're thankful for it. We're thankful that we get to be a small part of it. Lord, I pray that you would guide our hearts, that our lives would reflect what was talked about here today. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Bring comfort to the afflicted, freedom to the chained, and healing to the broken. It's your name we pray. Amen.